Okay, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place due to the outbreak of the coronavirus, this meeting of the Town of Berlin Board of Selectmen will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time. The Town of Berlin will use best efforts to post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the town's webpage, the town's YouTube channel, and approved minutes will be posted to mytowngovernment.org. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to attend the virtual meeting may attend via the Zoom webinar platform in one of two ways, with both audio and video access or by telephone audio only. Should any board member have technical difficulties and/or lose access to the meeting will recess for a period of time to see whether access can be restored. If not, the meeting will be continued to another date agreed to by a majority of the board or adjourned until our next scheduled meeting. All righty. And I'll call the meeting to order at 7:03. We have a few things we need to take care of before we move on to our coffee talk. Let's see, announcements. I did that. Approval of the minutes, September 8th, open session. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion. So approved. So
Second.
moved. There you go.
Okay, any comments or questions?
Looks fine to me.
Ditto.
Okay. Then we'll take a vote. Keefe, aye.
Stone eye.
Hawkins, aye.
Sounds unanimous to me. We do have one piece of old business, vote to authorize the chair to sign the host community agreement certificate for C3 Industries. Do you have any questions or do you want to make a motion?
So moved.
And seconded. Sign away, Chris.
All righty. Then we'll take a vote. Keefe, aye.
Stone eye.
Hawkins, aye.
All right. So I think we'll move on to our coffee talk and our presentations. And does everybody have their coffee?
No comment.
All right.
This is still a real board meeting, so I have to find coffee, huh?
Well,
Just
Fine.
oh,
find a cup.
Margaret got hers.
yeah, there you go.
Margaret.
That's
Find-
water. It
That's
really is water.
Just find a cup, Scott. There you go.
All right. Our first presentation is from our 1870 Town Hall manager, Lisa Smith. Hi, Lisa.
Hi,
Hey,
how are
Lisa.
you?
Hi, Lisa.
Hello, everyone. Good to see
Good.
you all again. Okay, so just update. Sadly, people have canceled. Anyone who has reserved any time have canceled their, events at the town hall because it's limited to 25 people. So what's happening, and I'm going to start next week doing more aggressive marketing, and trying to get, now that things have kind of settled down, I know people have been busy with kids in school and just still trying to figure things out, just start pursuing some of the other objectives I had as far as who could rent the building out, people teaching classes, there could be small events, small concerts, that kind of thing. Also want to work on, if that does become a thing and people want to rent or whatever, we can work on live streaming and get that up and running too. The Berlin seniors asked to use it one day, so they've used it. The library is going to be using the 1870 Town Hall. The Berlin seniors have requested again to use it again for another event. And I've been in touch with Victoria from COA, and they want to run Tai Chi and maybe chair yoga, that kind of thing. So I've been in touch with her. So, they're not paying because they're part of the government. So they're not, it's not, making any money, but you know, that will come. Just doing what you can. One of the meetings we had was discussing ADA compliance, and when the town hall was renovated, the parking lot and the driveway is made out of gravel, which is not ADA compliant because it needs to be paved over. So a little update on that. Margaret has put me in touch with a potential grant that could fund putting that driveway in. So what I've been doing, I've contacted 3 different pavers, one who's like, nope, we're too busy, another one who said they'd get back to me after 5 phone calls. And I called another one today and said, I need an estimate because this grant is due October 8th or 9th. And they kindly said, we will go over tonight and get it to you immediately. So I think that would be the group I'd like to go with. Anyway, so that's my objective right now, is to just get the building ADA compliant, you know, while it's sitting, get it ready to go. And that's really, I think, all I have. We're getting people in there, just government people, you know, just making it available for the COA, for the library, so at least people can use it. And until this COVID thing breaks, kind of slow going for the rental. People just don't want to do it. So,
Lisa, what about, is there a possibility that we could maybe organize like a pitch league or a cribbage league? I mean, if you, you know, like a lot of moose
Okay.
lodges and Elks will run that. I mean, you're paying any week, so, you know.
all right, so this is a great idea. Pitch league, cribbage league, having movie nights. All these wonderful ideas are excellent to have in there. Yes, I agree. That would be excellent. Who is going to run this? That's I would more than welcome anyone running a league, anyone taking the ball and saying, I want to do a league. I'm going to sign a contract. We're going to negotiate what I pay for rent. I'm going to charge the people coming in, and then, yeah, absolutely. This would be great. But there needs to be, and I have reached out through Facebook. I've reached out through the website. I talk to people all the time, saying that this building is available, that it can be rented. It means somebody has to take the ball and run with it,
Right.
and do that and incorporate these programs in the building. So yes, it could be a great part-time job for someone. As someone who has owned many businesses, I would be more than happy to help someone, you know, to consult with them on a business perspective and say, you know, this is the kind of things you should be thinking about, and this is the way you can make money with it. But what it requires is someone with some kind of entrepreneurial inclinations to say, I want to put this in there, or somebody who just wants to run something without making money, but making enough money to pay the rent of using the building. So it just requires people that want to do that. If you know someone that wants to run a cribbage league, by all means, have them contact me.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll start to reach out and see if there's any interest in the town. Because obviously with the cribbage and pitch league, you know, you could limit it to 24, you know, or you could even limit it to 20, you know, so that you have some wiggle room, you know, even number of teams, that's what you want. Pitch is usually 4 people at a table, so you have 5 teams. But
Okay, my question with that though, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Yep.
my only concern is that there's still, regardless of the fact that it's 24 or 25 people can be in the building,
right.
there are still 6-foot social distance requirements. So I'm wondering how we're going to fling cards across the table. So there is that concern too. I think it's a fabulous idea. I would love this COVID to be over so we could do all that. I think it would be awesome.
After cornhole,
The
Peg,
community.
indoor cornhole.
Well, you know, that's a possibility. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, 'cause
cornhole
you,
league.
yeah, because you could do that. I mean, you're what, 20 feet apart anyways, tossing the bag. And then the
Sure. And we
people up there-
have some dance floor rolls that could be put down over the pine floors so that, you know, the wooden cornhole stands wouldn't damage the pine floors because they're pine and so very
Right.
soft. So that would be doable. So it has to be something where it's limited to 25 people.
Right.
It's all on the website. The protocols are on the website. The rental contracts are on the website. Lots of ideas, my contact information on what I would do to help people. But bearing that in mind, it's just that we're right now, anything that goes in there has to be able to be done with the limitations of 25 people and 6 feet of social distancing.
Okay, all right. Let me reach out and see what I can do to stir up some
Yeah, art
interest to
classes,
get up there.
children's music classes. You know, I know that somebody did art classes before. I have reached out to all previous renters, and unfortunately, you know, because of COVID, they're putting it on hold. But there are dance groups, you know, things like that. It could be done. There are things that can be done, but again, it needs someone who, you
Right.
know, either wants to organize that. You know, it needs somebody who's going to organize that and run the ball on that. So
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Let me try at least to
Okay,
get
'cause
some
you know the town.
activity.
You've been around for a while.
Hey.
Well, in the town, longer than I have. No.
That's all right.
You're
I got you.
connected, Peg. I've
You
heard
went-
that.
She
I
went to
gotcha.
Berlin.
Uh-huh. I know.
So that's really the update. You know, I would love for people to reach out to me. I would love that if somebody in the community said, oh, I have this idea, I have this talent, I've always wanted to either share it or teach it or this or that, but I just don't know how to go about organizing it, making sure that materials and I get paid and that, you know, I can afford it and this and that. The joy of the town hall is the liability is pretty much covered, depending on the activity. An art class certainly would be covered. There's so many things that somebody doing that would not have to if they were just going out and renting a building. So many things they wouldn't have to do. But I think there are people out there that there's something they want to do, but they're not quite sure how to do it, or there's a little fear of jumping into it. And I would love to assist that person to take the ball and run with it. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Is there any other questions? Margaret?
This is probably, and Lisa, thank you so much for being so upbeat through all of COVID and now the newest septic issues for the 1870s. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that for a moment. We were alerted by the Board of Health very recently that there are questions regarding the 1870s septic system. The town does know that the septic itself is located on the grassy area near the flagpole in front of the church, but it is connected to the abutting homes system. And so when Lisa had asked proactively about food service in the 1870, that prompted questions by Neshoba Associated Boards of Health about potential septic and well issues. And so from what we understand, there are some, I'm beginning to understand the issue anyway, there are some issues that may be unresolved going back to 1959. And it's been initially recommended by our health agent that the town hire an engineer to determine the system location and the design capacity of the system. So the select board is aware of this. This is plugged in as a potential special town meeting article for funding so we can investigate that issue. That's all the information I have at the moment. So thank you for letting me convey that.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you, Lisa, for coming,
Thank you.
and hope you'll stick around.
Please do.
At the coffee talk.
I'm going to at least get the parking lot in. That's my new goal. Get the parking lot in. And then the septic.
So we have another presentation from our Council on Aging Director, Victoria Flynn.
Hi, everybody. Good evening.
Hi, Victoria.
So yes, happy almost fall, everybody. It's weird stepping outside in the morning and it's like 45 degrees out and you're like, oh, this isn't nice. So,
Get your wool sweaters out.
yeah, really. So at the Council on Aging, we've been working on quite a few projects. as Lisa had mentioned, that we have actually restarted our senior yoga, so we are really excited. We had our first class on Saturday. It was actually parking lot yoga, technically. We did it outside the town offices, and we had 5 participants, so we're excited about that. So if you're free on Saturday morning, come down for some yoga. As Lisa had mentioned as well, we're reaching out to our Tai Chi instructor. We are just trying to figure out a start date with him. He had something come up, so it doesn't look like he can start back up until October. So we're just trying to nail that down. And I am going to be talking with the council about seeing if, they're okay with us using 1870 to resume these classes as the weather gets colder. So to be announced on that one.
Okay.
Our van service is up and running. We have 2 drivers. We're doing trips Monday through Friday. So basically any doctor's appointments, pharmacy runs, grocery runs, any like necessity trip, we are more than willing to do any type of transport to. We are asking that everybody needs to wear a mask. You need to have a COVID screen before you come onto the van, like a temperature check. And our drivers are, more than happy to help with that. So we are excited about that. This week we've had our first full week of rides. So yay, glad the van's getting used.
Yeah.
And we're still collecting our durable medical equipment. It is being collected at the Council on Aging office. We are asking really for things such as like wheelchairs, walkers, canes, things of that nature. No like heavier equipment like oxygen tanks, anything like that. We need to get stuff that's cleaned and stuff that, if people would like it, that's fine. They just need to, realize that it's basically take it as is. For their overall safety's sake, just to be aware. So we are still collecting items. We are asking for people to call the Council on Aging beforehand, before anything gets donated, just so we can, have somebody there to make sure everything can be received. Earlier in the month, we did work with the Berlin seniors to co-sponsor Jackson Gilman. He was out at the Memorial School. He did a great job. The Berlin seniors did an excellent job putting that together. He was a lot of fun. It was like a little bright spot in the COVID. So we were very happy to work with the Berlin seniors on that. I think it was a good turnout overall. Christine, I know you were there. I hope you enjoyed it, because we certainly did.
I did.
Yeah.
There was a few laughs, and he was a little comical, but also musical.
Exactly. Nice little thing of both. So what else is going on? In the next few weeks, we're going to have a Medicare fraud webinar coming up. It's on October 6th on Thursday. It's going to be put on by the Elder Services of Merrimack Valley. So they're basically going to do, I think it's a Zoom meeting with us, just kind of going over just things for seniors and really anybody to be aware of. So we will get that posted up online as well. So if anybody has any particular questions about that, just let me know, and I will make sure that they get asked. We are helping to get the information out about the flu clinic. The registration for it is out in the latest Powder House News. So the form can just be filled out ahead of time. The flu clinic, I believe, is October 28th, 2 to 4 for seniors, and then 4 to 6 for everybody else. And I believe it's also at the school. So, but just check your Powder House News, because the info is in there. And we are also just trying to get some webinars going, some information sessions going. So just like, how do you use Zoom? How do you use Facebook Live? FaceTimes, things of that nature, just to try to help connect, everybody in the community, as Zoom is likely going to be our platform for a while, and probably other platforms as well. So we're going to be, Officer Goody and I are going to be trying to work together with some of the kids over at the high school, just to see if we can kind of get that organized. So that's also a to be determined. So, and then other than that, we are still having our senior work off program. We're still taking applications in for any senior who wants to try to get, get some hours in to try to help go against their taxes. So if you have any questions, again, just let the Council on Aging know, and we'll do what we can to answer them. So that's pretty much what we've been working on.
Well, I have to compliment you on the Powder House News. It looked very nice.
Well, thank you.
Very
Well,
good.
I give the credit to Lori Fairbay. She edited it. she's our newspaper, designer. So
Well, my
kudos
kudos
to Lori.
to her. Yes. All right. Are there any questions for Victoria?
Victoria, I know that some Saturdays, I don't know if they still do it. I don't know if you could check with Evie, but they have one of the young kids do all like technical issues, if you get stuck on your iPad or your Nook or anything like that. So I don't know if maybe that's an opportunity to try and hook up and share resources.
Yeah, I'll reach out to her tomorrow.
Okay.
Right. Any other questions? All right.
Oh, I
thank
got
you
off
so
easy.
much. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all for having me.
No problem.
Enjoy your coffee.
Will do.
Wow, it really is.
Thank you, everybody.
We also have Police Chief Tom Galvin with us tonight. And I think he was going to give us a little update and some information on our new Traffic Safety Advisory Committee.
But a couple things. I'm going to kind of run through a couple of monthly reports. I wasn't obviously able to be at my last appointment, and again, I apologize for that. But had some pretty serious family issues that we're working through, so I do apologize. But in terms of July and August, I think it's kind of the theme of what Lisa and Victoria said is COVID. It's still affecting our day-to-day operations and everything that we do. But the officers are doing a good job. They're working through it. They're becoming more comfortable in some things, I think, as we all are, as we've dealt with this. But, we've continued to try and increase our face-to-face interactions with people. And some of you may even see even some of the things that I had historically done, meeting with some groups and having coffee and things like that. We're starting to do those activities again to get back out into the public, which is an important part of what we do. But it still has had an effect. We're still taking reports over the phone and not doing as much proactive traffic enforcement because, as I look, we still have our building closed here. So, as all of the officers, as they're comfortable, have been taking more on themselves. We haven't changed our protocol to really go back to normal. So they're, sticking their heads in people's cars and doing the things. They're really trying to focus on the most egregious things. But between the 2 months, we still handled about 1,700 incidents. Only 6 that involved criminal charges, a couple of arrests. But our motor vehicle crash numbers kind of spiked in this 2-month period. We had 25 crashes that we responded to. And when you look at the June report where we had very few motor vehicle stops, we jumped back up to 97 with 65 citations. I think that's telling because what I have directed the office to do is really focus on the most egregious violations that we see, so that normally 2/3 of our stops don't result in a citation being issued. We have a lot more warnings that are issued to people. So you see that the higher percent of those stops are resulting in citations. But as I said, the traffic crashes have increased significantly over the past 2 months. We had a somewhat serious drunk driving incident where a vehicle rolled over. Took quite a bit of resources because the operator told us that he wasn't the driver. So it led to an extensive search at night to ultimately determine that there was no one else in need that may have been in the woods. And the driver was luckily sustained minor injuries. And then police, fire, and EMS, we assisted Bolton and the state police with a serious crash out on 495. And the reason I highlight that is for a lot of the responders, especially a lot of the Bolton fire responders and my officers, it was the first serious crash they'd really seen in their careers. Unfortunately, it turned out to be a fatal crash. And Jeff Legenda, the fire chief in Bolton, organized a critical incident debrief after the incident and that our personnel all went to. And it just highlights the email I sent to you, explaining my absence from the meeting and what goes on, and that we have to look out for the mental health of our people. I know for the officer that responded for the police department, it was extremely tough on him. And I had some long conversations with him the next day and the next couple of days. And it had an effect on him. And one of the things that I talked to him about was the fact that when I was his age, and if I had come in, I wouldn't have gotten an audience with the police chief about a car accident. Second, but if I'd gone to my sergeant and said, what I saw at that crash really bothered me, they would have looked at me with probably a few choice words and told me, kid, get back on the road. We've learned a lot in how we handle things and how we carry things over the years, and the effects and the cumulative effects it has on our people. So I'm just happy to see the changes and see that we're able to offer those services to our people to make sure that they're doing well, and we take care of their mental health, starting early in their career and as we go through their career. We also had an arrest that kind of led to a COVID scare. Officers arrested an individual for domestic violence, and in the initial haste responding to the call, one of the officers didn't have his mask on right away. And understandable as things turned out, it wasn't a long time, it wasn't a long exposure. But later on during the booking process, some of the statements the individual made and his initial physical condition led us to believe that he may have been infected. So it led to a decontamination of our cell block. The officer ended up having to be tested, which ended up negative. But it highlighted how every day and everything we do is being affected by COVID. Normally the officers aren't wearing a mask when they're driving around in the car. So you get a call, normally it's not something that's an emergency nature. You're going to go talk to somebody, and you have that time to think to put your mask on. But, it was a high intense situation, with violence, and, the officer just didn't think. It was more focusing on getting there and helping the person that was in need. And that led to that exposure. So it just shows how this is really still affecting us day to day and call to call. Another big issue that we're seeing, and Dennis emailed me just this week about one of our officers actually who was a victim of the unemployment fraud cases. And they just continue to turn up. So, when we talk to the public, we just make sure people know that, follow the process that government has in place and the unemployment has in place to file a claim to say that you're not actually the one requesting unemployment benefits. Because again, I said, it just happened to one of our officers just this week, and it continues to happen, across the country. And the last couple of months, we've had some interesting animal calls. It's, normally we talk, there's maybe an interesting call there, call here, there. But this month we had, 2 months, we had goats, horses, dogs, squirrels, raccoons, a cow, a hawk, the bear, which I think everyone's heard about. The bear been around town menacing bird feeders, and chickens. Unfortunately, we had an incident where a dog and some chickens interacted, and it didn't end favorably for the chickens. But ultimately, the situation's been resolved. So that's kind of how we stand for the last couple of months. Our hope is, and I know Margaret and I have talked about it, as we're able to hopefully open the building up and the facilities up, and that we can start to loosen the restrictions that I have put on the offices in terms of interaction, and get back to more what we would like to be normal, and as things move forward. So that's those couple of months. Does anyone have any questions about that before I move on to traffic and some other things?
What's the cause of the so many car accidents?
It's a combination. One, people have obviously through July and August started to come back out, started to come back to work, but traffic volume was still relatively low. And what we see is that there are those people that have taken advantage of that. So speed tends to be an issue. Again, alcohol was an issue in some of the incidents. So it's a combination of factors.
I was thinking maybe they were zooming in their cars.
Oh, oh.
But
I have a question and a comment for the chief, if I could, through the chair.
Sure.
Actually, two comments. Well, one question and one comment. First of all, the example that Chief gave about the mask wearing, it shows, now most of us are not public safety, but it shows how important it is, although it's exhausting, how important it is to maintain a high degree of diligence in just practicing social distancing, wearing masks, wearing gloves, keeping clean. It's just an extended effort, and it can be exhausting, but that's a good example of why it's important to be diligent. The other thing I had, Chief mentioned the unemployment fraud. I was also a victim and had to report to DUA right away. that I wonder if there's something that we can do for our seniors, if the Executive Office of Elder Affairs or something, some agency might be able to do a cybersecurity webinar for seniors that we might be able to even replay on our cable access channel, because it is so prevalent right now with the cybersecurity threats. So those are my comments. Thank you.
I think Victoria left, huh? But something that she and I can talk about and see what's available.
She's in the audience,
Okay.
being promoted potentially.
Oh.
Hi again.
Again.
Hi there.
So yes, actually, I think Chief Gavin makes an excellent point. I do think that that's something that we can definitely look into doing. Absolutely. You know, because cybersecurity and fraud, it's for everything from unemployment to, you know, Lord knows what else. So absolutely. We'll get on that.
Nice. So today, early this afternoon, we had the first meeting of the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee. So it's for those that don't know what that is. Actually, I'll read the mission. That makes it easier to explain. So the mission of the committee is to assess ongoing traffic and pedestrian safety needs and prepare for transportation infrastructure projects through a multi-departmental approach of systematically and logically studying conditions and developing solutions to propose to the select board. So one of the things that I think we've, you know, through even my monthly reports with the board, conversations with Margaret, is that issues come up, but we're not centralized in how we discuss them, how we plan for them. And, you know, we've really realized that when we look at a lot of the traffic and infrastructure issues that we have, funding is going to become an issue. You know, we need to have some funding in the beginning for design and implementation, and to even get to a construction process. So we looked around, as all our neighbors, or a lot of our neighbors, tend to do this. So our committee is made up of myself, the fire chief, the highway superintendent, the building inspector, the town administrator is a non-voting member, and then we have a member from the planning board, which is currently Tim Wheeler. We do not have a member yet from capital planning, and then Mary Porter represents the finance committee. And so today was our first meeting, and I was lucky enough to be elected as the chair. Dave Smith is the vice chair, and Margaret is the clerk. So we had really today, that's what today's meeting was about, except for a couple things. Obviously, there's a lot going on with Riverbridge and reevaluating the development agreement and the impact study. So we met with Roberta Cameron, who's preparing the study, to talk about what we've seen so far with the impacts of traffic at Riverbridge, and also look at the current development agreement and those traffic projects that are supposed to have been completed or to be completed, and where we're going to look in the future with those. Because as we look, you know, that agreement was signed quite a long time ago, and I think some of the vision at the time has changed, or at the time didn't really understand what the scope of that work would entail, and may entail now. So one of the things we discussed, and we'll have to discuss more in depth with the board, is, so there's two remaining projects right now for traffic. One is the bridge over Northbrook, and the other is the intersections of at Pleasant and South. And the development agreement calls for Riverbridge to pay for the replacement of the bridge deck, not the bridge, the entire bridge, but just the bridge deck and a pedestrian bridge. And then at at South and Pleasant, to, you know, the funky intersection in front of the post office, create, the way it's written is 2 T intersections, which I think if we logically look at that, it's a lot more complex than simply, you know, remarking the road and adding some signs. So one of the things we discussed is possibly working something out with the Sennies, where instead of completing these projects, we come up with a sum for seed funding. So any project that we want to do, or we may want to apply for a grant for, requires us to have design and engineering completed, or a certain amount of our own funding towards design and engineering. So that if we had this account or this funding, that would allow us to take a look at the bridge over Northbrook, to, not only replace the bridge deck, a bridge deck at this point, on a foundation that needs to be replaced wouldn't make sense. So we would be able to do some more extensive looking into that and what would need to be replaced, and then potentially get onto a MassWorks grant or something else to actually fund the projects. And then same with South and Pleasant, because as we look at that, to really how to reconfigure that, to change it, there's a lot of options, many of which aren't very easy, but could also change the flow of traffic overall on Pleasant Street, the intersection at Pleasant and Central, which is something that, the traffic light idea has been floated or talked about it, and, we could start to use some design and engineering funding for that as well. So there's a lot to be discussed, and that we're going to continue to discuss. And I think Roberta is going to look at and evaluate as she continues to look at this, and we move forward. And that was just one agenda item we talked about. And the second that kind of came into a timely thing is the Streets and Spaces grant, which is actually related to COVID. So there was a grant available. A lot of it was created for communities to open up outdoor dining and a lot of those things, but it also allows for pedestrian bicycle safety, traffic flow issues, which are some things that we have. One of the things that we discussed, or we had done last year, was a Safe Routes to School grant that would allow, which we applied for some signage and some improvements for kids that would be walking to BMS. Unfortunately, we didn't get that grant, but a lot of that ties in with this program. So what we decided is we're going to try and massage that language a little bit to work it into this Streets and Spaces grant, and also work towards a pilot for the Carter Street, Woodward Ave, I guess Village District, for lack of a better term, to maybe pilot one-way traffic flow, so that we have better traffic flow around the triangle, where it's one way on Carter, one way on Woodward Ave, and which would allow us for additional parking, but also for better pedestrian traffic, additional sidewalks. So what we can do is we can get temporary barricades, paint, other delineators, in order to set this up on a temporary basis with the signage, to see how the flow works and study it if it's something that the town would like to implement permanently.
And the kicker is? The kicker is that we have 3 days.
Yeah, the grant is due on Tuesday.
So, through the chair, may I add, we actually, we talked with Tim Wheeler, who's a member of the committee, about this today, possibly about divvying up some duties to pull the application together. And we reached out to CMRPC right after the meeting, and CMRPC is available to help us with this tomorrow and Monday. So fortunately, it's not a very complex application. It doesn't require pre-engineering or design work ahead of time. It does require a schematic design, which CMRPC can help us with, and some summary data. So we will try to do this. And when I reached out to CMRPC, I actually reached out to them to ask about temporary ADA compliant curb ramps and crosswalks for the project too. And as long as they're temporary, we could throw those in as well. I just don't want us to lose a grant because we're asking for permanent things, which they are really not focusing on in this grant program. They're looking to address some immediate, quick launch projects. So hopefully we can pull that together. Thanks, Chief.
Yep. And then it's still related to traffic, but not related to the committee. We have a piece of equipment here at the PD that's it's a kind of a covert radar tracking box traffic counter, and it hadn't been working properly. So we've been able to get the software updated and new batteries. And my plan had been to put it out and start to do some tracking last week. So I only got some short-term data this week, but I won't name the road that I used. But I did 3 days of tracking on a back road where I've gotten some complaints about speeding. And the data was kind of interesting. So, almost 1,438 vehicles passed in a 3 day period, 3 full days. and only 51 of those vehicles were actually over the speed limit. A very low number. And of those 51, 43 were within 1 to 4 miles an hour of the speed limit. So some of the things that I want to look at, and I'm actually going to look at and discuss with the committee, is speed limits. Because one thing that we run into is our major roads, Central, West, South, Pleasant, the roads that you see the police on a lot because they're our main roads in town, and that's where the majority of our traffic is, have posted speed limits. But there's a lot of our streets that don't have posted speed limits. And because of that, and because of our zoning, most of those speed limits are actually 40 miles an hour. And, we had a discussion about a particular road here with some of the officers, and one of the guys is like, I got to go out and try it. I got to go out and see. And he's like, he goes, he was nervous doing 45 miles an hour on that road just to see how fast he could go. And so one thing I want to do is have a discussion with the committee, and I've never, I'll be honest, been a big fan of doing speed zone surveys because they've always turned out not the way I wanted to, the ones I've done in the past. And seeing if we maybe want to try and have speed limits set on some of these roads. I'm not keen on having 40-mile-an-hour signs posted on the roads because the majority of people don't go. This one road that I studied, 95% of the people were doing 40 miles an hour or less. That 95th percentile speed is great to have, but they generally set speed limits at the 85th percentile. And unfortunately, the 85th percentile was above 35, it was 36. So it could lead to those speed limits being set at 40 anyways. So it could be a catch-22 that even though the speed limits are already at 40, a lot of people don't realize it and try not to travel at those speeds. So it's something I want to discuss with the committee. This piece of equipment we have, we can utilize to do that, to take some of the actual manual labor out of doing the paperwork that the state requires. And I also I talked to a couple of other chiefs today about borrowing some other pieces of equipment so we could do it, as much of it automated as possible. And see if maybe we have in some areas, not necessarily a speed problem, but a speed limit problem, where if we can lower the speed limit, it might help us. But having many of our roads non-thickly settled, it's a product of our zoning that, we have some beautiful open space, but because of that, it allows our speed limits to be set a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm. So are there any questions for the chief? Meg.
I have two.
Yeah.
So Chief, you started to hit on it. There was quite a bit of chatter last week or so on Facebook, people complaining about people zipping through various streets in town. And the police department, I don't know who responded back, but somebody did and said, hey, let us know if we can come sit in your driveway. So you had started that last year. I think Detective Trongone was supposed to put a plan together. Where are we with that? Because I know I've offered up my driveway multiple times. Guarantee, Margaret, if we have a hole in the budget, come on up to Lyman and we'll get that filled in about a week's worth of time. So where are we with any plans to sit in
utilize people's driveways? The problem is driveways a lot of time aren't the best place to sit. So you'll notice there's a lot of times that the officers are sitting in areas where there's a little bit of grass and some space to sit off to the side. The way the vehicle mounted equipment works, they don't work well in a lot of driveways. So we utilize them as needed. So part of what this equipment does also, and we're utilizing that, is it develops, I guess they're called enforcement plans. And I laugh because I did one for this particular road, and it showed, like the top 4-hour periods in order to do enforcement. And and then it shows you how many vehicles during that time frame were speeding. And, so it gave me all these different 4-hour periods, and it was 1 vehicle, 2 vehicles, 3 vehicles. So it's going to be a combination of collecting the data and doing that. One of the things that happened actually recently and this week is one of the officers on his own personally was looking at Facebook and was kind of going to the areas that people were posting, because people are posting things, but my phone's not ringing. I actually had one call today, which was the first call I've had in weeks about traffic, and it was frustrating because when I spoke with the woman, she described an incident that happened early this morning, and where her home is, what was very frustrating is that there were 2 police vehicles parked down the street because there was another operation, I guess I'll call it, going on this morning. And it wasn't 200 yards past where those vehicles were parked, where the officers were sitting on the side of the road. So there's some frustration that someone sees a police car, they get by it and around a corner, and then they gun it. So we're working through it. Hopefully having this data is going to give us a better idea, because sometimes, like this particular road that I looked at, I've gotten that from people, you can use my driveway. Well, in 3 days, there's only 50 cars to be stopped. It's very hard to spend a lot of time out there when it's one this hour, one that hour. So if we can get some better ideas of those timeframes, so when someone calls and says, hey, you can use my driveway, it's a problem, I can put this box out there for 2 days. I can look at the data and then say, all right, yeah, you're right. From 2 to 3 p.m., we do have a problem on this road, and we can start to schedule some things through that.
All right, well, you're more than welcome to put it on mine. It goes from the corner of Crosby up. So there's, you can stick it in the driveway, you can stick it in the grass, you can stick it on the lawn. But I guarantee if you sit or come up between 4:30 and 6, Monday through Friday, you're going to get some data.
So when you actually, tomorrow morning when it's light out, take a left out of your driveway and look up about 3 telephone poles.
Okay. All right. See, that's why I go down the road. And then the second question, God, this was probably about a year ago. Whatever happened to the discussion of fixing the off-ramp on 495 onto 290, so you kind of avoid all the backup that can go all the way back to Bolton and then trying to get around the corner and up on 290 to Worcester?
The last meeting we had with the state on that, the designs are done, everything's approved, and they were just awaiting funding.
Okay.
So they did they did that first phase of it, which was to lengthen the queue lane. So if you're out there and you're approaching it now, that 4th lane that queues you to go to the exit was extended quite a bit. That next phase, and the way they had told us then is that this fall is when it would hopefully be going out to bid to be done next year. But I haven't heard anything if there was any funding allocated to it in the budget.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any more questions for Chief Galvin? And I'm including the attendees when I say, are there any questions?
It'd be nice when we can get back to doing this in person and have like actual discussions versus trying to figure out who's an attendee. And
Mary's waving, or was waving.
Well, to the attendees, there's a button that lets you raise your hand. So if you'd like to be heard on any of these subjects, go ahead and hit that raise your hand button, and we'll know that you want to be called on.
All right. Well, it doesn't look like there's any hands raised right now, but that's what Coffee Talk's about. So please feel free if you have a question.
And again, Tom, thank you in front of everybody. Whoever takes care of the little railroad building down on Linden by the tracks, to see that it's nice and clean once again.
it is there. I was surprised they came out and cleaned up that, just because it was just that one.
Yeah, it was just a small, yeah.
And they came out and cleaned it quick. So we'll see. I mean, I know the state has offered and is going through their process about fencing it now with some black chain link fence. I just wonder. I was looking at it the other day. I was with Dave Smith, and I don't know how much it's even used anymore. There isn't electricity. There's no electricity running to it anymore. I don't know if it actually functions at all.
No, I think people just park there to take a walk up the dam. And there were people parked on Linden, by the Duffys and by the Parmenters on both sides of Linden last weekend. So when it's a nice day, that becomes a very, very busy parking area. And I know that they park in front of the gate too that says, hey, don't park here. In case you guys ever need to, get there, take the SUV, and get out there. But
well, with any luck, when we have our special town meeting and the parking enforcement statute, we will accept that, and then we'll be able to write parking tickets for things like that. So,
okay.
But
Well,
I did
thanks.
when I did meet with the state, one of the other things that we found out there is the bridge out there had been completely tagged. It's almost like any piece of wood that gets out there is put out there
Mhm.
gets graffiti on it.
Yeah, and I mean, in all the way back in the quarry, that's just a thing of art back there. But thankfully, that's out of someone's eye unless you're up
Right.
on the dam and around the corner to the back. But yeah, it's nice to see our little building clean.
Yep. And we talked, and I haven't seen them yet. I don't know where they are on the line, but they did say that this past week was cleanup week was going to start. But again, they could be anywhere between Framingham and Leominster, so I don't know when that would put them in Berlin.
Well, I'll keep an eye out on it because I go over those tracks daily. So yeah, sooner we can get that train trash picked up, then the better. Appreciate that.
I agree.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I guess we'll move on to the next subject that we were going to discuss, which is the board's draft FY21 goals and objectives. The board has been working on some goals and objectives. I don't know whether it would be best if we, as each individual board member, could maybe just talk about one or so of, or maybe your most important goal and objective, just to let people know some of the things that are on this list. I think we started out with 14.
Yeah.
Or yeah, maybe more like 16. And if people have ideas or about them, they could raise their hand and let us know suggestions. So I don't know, Peg, do you want to start? Do you want to talk about maybe a couple of your ideas or some that you think are important?
Yeah, one of them, and actually Chief had hit it during one of his chats, was that I had suggested that we get a small group of grant writers together. There are a couple classes going on in Assabet next month. I know that I'm signed up. June, I think, might be. Mary, Lisa, Victoria. I don't know if there's any others, but thought that since we don't know what the funding is going to be like for the town, and what funds are going to be available to assist any, whether volunteer committee or elected committee or anything that we need, that it would be smart that we had a group of people who were able to get together and take a look at various websites and see what we could do to bring money into the town. The other one that I had was looking at alternate energy. Being a select board member, I get to see all the expenses that June and Amy put together and probably cringe as soon as they send it out because they know that I'm firing multiple questions back. So when I look at the electrical bills from a couple of the town buildings, it just absolutely drives me insane that we're spending that much money on electricity. So with the help, very much help of Margaret, we pushed forth a grant. Margaret, have you heard anything on the grant? Nope. She's looking for her unmute button. Anyways,
Oh,
there you
yes, I'm sorry.
go. Have you heard anything?
Not yet.
Okay.
I will check in with the department.
Okay. So we put forth a grant to look for some money for, organizations to come out and take a look at the town barn. And is it feasible to put potential solar panels up on the top of the roof? Is it potential to put them in the ground and make a little solar array? So those were two of my key ones. I mean, obviously budget focused, one trying to drive down the cost of electricity, for the town buildings, and the other one to have a group of, very smart, wicked, devoted people who are going to go around and look for grants, whether it's something to help the library, whether it's something to help Victoria, whether it's something to help Lisa, it doesn't matter. If it's a town opportunity, then, maybe Amy or June can all, sew us little like grant writing capes and put them on and see if we can get money in for the town to help us. Those are my two.
Okay, Scott, do you want to share any of the ideas that you had? Or what's most important to you, whether it's yours or someone else's, doesn't matter.
Sure. Sorry, I was trying, I'm down to one monitor, so I was trying to pull it up so that I could look at it as I go. One of the ones I did is just the center of the town. There's already a town center planning process that's underway. The Bullard House has always been a warm spot and important to my family. My father having sort of been raised there a little bit. The 1870 Town Hall, 19 Carter, First Parish Church, and so some of the stuff that Tom had talked about about the parking and traffic and sidewalks. And so there is a process sort of underway, and it's just making sure we can do our best to sort of support it and shepherd it through whatever process to help keep our center of town sort of both a focus of the cultural heritage of this town and a place that sort of makes this town special.
Yeah.
And then the other piece, which I don't think was mine, but I'm looking at sort of our sort of ranking, it came high for all of us, is finding ways to preserve the 40B and affordable housing that we have in this town. We've worked really hard over many, many years to reach the state sort of, I don't want to say limit is not the word, but the goal of having enough affordable housing where both it is good for people who need more affordable housing, but also means that developments in this town have to go through the planning and zoning and fit the sort of master plan of the town. And so we've worked so hard to get them to not accidentally lose them, or individual ones, which we have lost some, and finding a funding mechanism or other ways to preserve those.
Great.
And so those are sort of two that I'm going to sort of watch and shepherd the best I can. I can just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, we had many ideas. I would just say that we sort of combined one of Peg's ideas was to develop a volunteer committee guide and to help committees improve communication between each other. I know that I've talked with people from ZBA and from conservation and planning board and Board of Health, and I think sometimes we need to find a way that they can know what the other group is doing in their meetings, because sometimes they come together and one project might be affected by each of those boards. And so we might take a look at that. See, you talked about the Bullard House, didn't you?
Yep.
And we talked about remediation of potential tax-taking properties, investigating whether it's the right thing to do to take the property, whether it would take, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the property back to its original shape. And if at all possible, I know that when I sat in on one of the meetings, the planning board said that it's just very important for the town. It's almost our responsibility sometimes, if there are tax-taking type properties like the Tolman or the Bonzoli Dam, to investigate whether the town can afford to remediate the properties. So we are going to talk about these at our next meeting on Monday, and try to put them into an order, I think, as to which ones are most important and which ones we at least have our eye on, but maybe a little bit more towards the bottom of the list. So I don't know whether any of the attendees might have any questions, or they might want to just wait until Monday and see what the potential outcome will be.
Or I would also throw out there that if there are items that are near and dear to their heart, or someone that they know, to send it to us. I mean, this list here is certainly not an exhaustive list. Margaret tasked us with come up with 4 or 5. So I think these are all probably near and dear to us. But if there's something out there that, town folks are saying, oh, you missed the boat on this, I really wish you'd talk about, insert item here, email any of us, and happy to reach out and get a little bit more information and add it. I will speak for the board probably this one time only, but this list that we have is not like a one and done.
Right.
This is our first journey into this, so it's going to be ever growing. So please don't think that, oh, woohoo, look, the board's doing goals and objectives, and then it goes away. It's not. As I said, this is our first opportunity to get out there and actually do them. So I definitely encourage everyone in the town who has something, and I saw Dennis shaking his head when we were talking about Tolman and the dam. So, if there's anything that's a big bug in your craw, definitely reach out to us and see what we can do to help.
Yeah. And you may find that they're already on the list of either our goals and objectives or Margaret's goals and objectives, because we have quite a few. Yeah. And if we get to half of these goals in the next year or so, I'm sure we'll be lucky. All right.
I can tell Scott's sitting outside. I can hear crickets.
Oh, is that's audible by you?
Yep,
Oh.
I can hear you. Yep. Just like you hear the train at 7 o'clock out my window, I can hear you.
Oh,
So
maybe
it's kind of cool.
Is it crickets or peepers?
There are crickets. Hopefully there's some sort of music festival happening a couple blocks that way that I hear every now and then. That doesn't come across too much. It's just too nice not to be indoors. So.
Right. So if we'd like to move on, we did want to talk about the November 3rd voting, the update in the protocols. I don't know, we had invited Eloise, the town clerk, and we'd also invited James, the assistant.
He's right there.
Okay.
The big question is, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Mary's saying more volume.
More volume.
I gotta go to pick up your grandmother tomorrow morning. I'll be going to bed shortly.
I think we're getting part of another conversation.
You know, James is a good friend of Andrew.
I think you met him.
Let me text Eloise, tell her
I
we're
think
going.
Eloise may be talking to her granddaughter right now.
All right. Well,
Who's at Arwen's birthday?
Yeah, he was at Iwan's birthday.
There you go, Mary, you muted her. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, we're getting close to the November 3rd election.
Are you having an election?
Yeah, it's, in case anyone's
Oh, boy.
heard about that at all. We've got about 800 ballot requests so far. Probably closer to 900 now. And they keep coming in. I think we had about 650 mail-in ballots returned for the primary, and that's kind of been the fun new element to hosting an election now is a lot of it's done by mail. We're getting our head around how to deal with that volume. It's mostly just more volunteers, and so we have some extra folks floating around for the November 3rd election that will be helping us out. Mostly just focusing on getting those ballots kind of through the system. I think the last presidential election, we had about 90% turnout, and with as many people participating. I mean, we had way more people voting in the state primary this last time around than I think we've ever had in a primary before, which was kind of par for the course across the state. So it probably 90% turnout again is what I would imagine, although a lot of folks voting by mail, hopefully. which will help traffic in the building a little bit. What are the fun and exciting things? Early voting has been extended for the November 3rd state election. So it's from October 17th through October 30th. I don't think we really have a plan in place on how we want to manage that yet. Getting into that time of year where for the primary, we were able to do it outside, just in front of the building. That seemed to work relatively well. I know that we kind of danced around the building access policy a little bit, but I don't think I heard too many complaints.
Do you
if
want
there
to
were any issues, we'd love to hear about them. But
Did you want to talk to us about like when people come to vote, if they come in person, where they enter, just to remind them?
yeah, I think the biggest issue we ran into with the state primary was that enough folks struggled to find the rear entrance of the building and to identify that that's where they were supposed to go to vote, that we're gonna just have more signage out in front of the building by the street. I think Eloise has already started talking to Highway about that. She might be able to comment a little bit more, but mostly just trying to make it as clear as possible to go around behind the building. It seems like having people enter and exit through those two doors down by the police carport worked fairly well. It means no one's walking past each other to get in and out of the building. So, Mary, have a question?
Well, Eloise talked to me a little bit this afternoon after she talked to Dave, and I guess there's going to have a big piece of wood if you're coming off of 62 and going outbound on Linden, telling people before they would take that right to come into the parking lot by the mailboxes to just continue forward, because people are so well trained not to go into that other exit. They're really spooked to go in when for years it says emergency vehicles only.
Mm-hmm.
But so you have to kind of overcome people. So Dave is going to put a big sign, unobstructed sign, telling people who are driving outbound on Linden to keep going.
Yeah. I was gonna ask public safety if we could throw like a trash bag over each of those do not enter signs, just for during the election, just to avoid any confusion. But
So James, besides traffic, were there any other lessons learned from the state primary that you guys are going to do different, better for the big one coming up in November?
I think it's mostly just preparing for more ballots. Is the big thing. The number of people in person at the state primary, I don't think was ever really an issue. We were kind of prepared to handle more folks than we ever got at one point in time. So even if in-person traffic increased considerably, it doesn't seem like the current setup would necessarily break. I think that one thing that we have to figure out is if we need to have more voting booths set up, which means setting up in the hall might not necessarily work. And so in that case, I imagine that we'd probably just end up trying to set up in the training room like we normally do, because you're supposed to have a certain number of booths per voter. And with the social distancing requirements on the voting booths themselves and all that stuff, it becomes kind of tricky to meet that requirement. And still keep everybody, 6 feet apart. So I think we have to brainstorm that a little bit more to know exactly what makes the most sense.
So can I ask the elephant in the room question?
Mm-hmm.
Lots of chatter. You see it on TV. You read it all over social media. Oh my God, I can't send my ballot in because they're never going to count it. What's going to happen to it? I'm going to get 18 of them. I can double vote. All the nonsense that's out there. I mean, I can speak from personal experience.
Yeah.
James, I was one of those 900. The form came out. I signed it. I drove down to the town office, dropped it in the green bucket. You and Eloise shipped me the form back. I filled it out. I signed it, and I went off again. And there's a website that you to check to make sure your ballot was counted. So can you calm people's fears or rhetoric or, oh my God, the sky's on fire, mentality of don't vote by mail, because it's bad. Go in person, which starts the, oh my God, I can't go in person. People are going to make me sick. So can you kind of like balance that off a little bit?
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky because there's certain requirements that we have to meet when it comes to sending ballots by mail. We can't hand anybody a ballot to then take and leave the building. If they're voting in person, they can vote in person and then leave the ballot with us. Otherwise, we're required to mail it if you're voting absentee, not at the polling place. And so that's kind of the biggest sticking point usually in terms of trying to avoid having to rely on the post office is if you're not going to come in and do early voting in person, or if you're not going to vote absentee in person, which you can still do by appointment, or if you're not going to vote in person on election day itself, we have to send that ballot by mail. I know a lot of people are kind of running into more issues than usual in terms of having ballots sent to colleges. A lot of times what would happen is the student would be able to pick up the ballot at home or something like that. That's a little bit more difficult now because students aren't necessarily able to leave campus and come back quite as freely. And so those issues are I don't really have a terribly good solution for that. Just because parents can't come in and pick up a ballot for their student and then take it to them in person. We can't let that happen. It's against the rules. But the easiest thing to do is, if you're at all concerned about the postal system or anything like that, is there is the green drop box right at the entrance of the building. You can put your application in there. You can also just drop your ballot off in there. Dennis checks that periodically. We get a lot, he knocks on our door very frequently with a lot of ballots. And then election night, we check that at 8 o'clock, close the polls. Before the polls close, we make sure that that's empty and that there's no ballots in there. So any last minute ballots that are coming in, the best thing to do is drop it off there. I know that the postmaster was delivering ballots to us as they came in the day of the election as well. So we got those as they arrived at the post office, which was very nice of him.
So can I vote twice? And here's my question is that you guys send me the ballot.
Mhm.
I sign it, I send it, I drive down to the town office, dump it in the green box. I'm like, woo, I'm done.
Yeah.
And then I come down on election day and I'm like, hi, I'm here. Can I vote? Do I get to vote again? I mean, what is the process to say no peg, check, scratch, done?
Every ballot goes through check-in and check-out, whether it's in the hands of the voter or an election worker who's processing those absentee ballots. And so with early voting now, it gets a little bit convoluted. It used to be pretty straightforward that whatever ballot, made it to the check-in first, whether it was the absentee ballot or somebody coming in to vote. As soon as the name is checked off on check-in, that's it. And so if you arrived at the polls before your absentee ballot was processed the day of the election, because none of the absentee ballots could process prior to the day of the election, then we would give you a ballot. You'd be able to go through, cast that. When the person then comes through with your absentee ballot to bring that through check-in and check-out, we would see that you've already come in and voted, and we would mark that as spoiled. And so that ballot doesn't get cast. Likewise, if we've already processed your absentee ballot on the day of the election, then you wouldn't be able to get another ballot and cast that. And so you're only able to vote once. The complicating factor with early voting is that when we receive the ballot back is when it's considered cast. And so if you were to receive an early ballot by mail, which from the perspective of the voter is a very similar process to voting absentee. You get a ballot mailed to you, you put it in the envelope, you send it back to us. When we get it back, we check you off on the check-in sheet effectively. And so that ballot is the one that will be cast. And so the timeline is now more drawn out on that whole process, but there's no way to effectively vote absentee and then vote in person.
Okay.
Or vote early and vote in person, vote by mail and then vote early. And, any combination of those things, the system has a lot of checks in place to prevent a second ballot from being cast for any individual.
I appreciate that. I mean, just to try and dispel some of the myths and pandemonium and just absolute fabrication of crap that's out there regarding voting. It's nice to hear from, a voting
it gets
person
convoluted
to say, yeah.
pretty quickly, but
Yeah.
You used to have effectively like two categories of voters. You either had in-person or absentee. Now you have in-person, absentee, early voters, UCAVA, especially qualified, which has existed for a long time. UCAVA and especially qualified are similar now, but it has to do with whether or not you're overseas and stuff like that. So it's a more convoluted picture now from the election official side of the equation, but and some of that spills over to the voter. So it is kind of hard to understand exactly how it all fits together sometimes.
Oh, Mary's
Mary?
waving.
Molly Reed, Principal Assessor, has a question, and also just a reminder to anybody in the audience, if you want to be heard, just hit the button that says raise your hand, and then we can recognize you. Go ahead, Molly.
I just wanted to know, with the mail-in ballots, can you count those as they come in, or do you have to wait till the night of the election to count them?
Nothing can be counted until after polls close, effectively. And so there is a provision now where we're able to open the envelopes for early ballots and get those into the ballot box ahead of time. But the process for that, it's more helpful if you're a municipality that has multiple precincts, and because you can then set up a central tabulation point and basically deal with all of those precincts all at once without having to then send all those ballots out to the precincts and things like that. And so, because that becomes a very convoluted process. And so, it's like typically, I think for the last presidential election, I'd have to look, but it's unusual for us to have more than 150 ballots. And so the fact that it's unusual for us to have more than 150 mail-in ballots, it's the fact that we had 650 for the state primary when normally 200-300 voters total for the state primary, kind of gives an indication of the volume, the increased volume that we're dealing with in terms of mail-in ballots. It's changed the way that we have to manage the election. So, but we have a lot of volunteers for November 3rd, and so unfortunately, we only have the one precinct. The precinct is in the place where the ballots are stored. So it's fairly easy for us to process everything the day of. And so adding extra complexity, trying to, open stuff ahead of time, get them into the ballot box ahead of time, doesn't really provide a huge amount of benefit to us.
Okay. Are there any other questions for James? Is Eloise still there? Does she want? No? Okay.
She had full faith and confidence in James, and she said that she was going to retire, but if we needed her, we could call her. So James is in charge.
Now I'm in trouble.
Oh, boy.
Oh, Margaret has a question.
Margaret.
I just want to reiterate, James and Eloise, that the town team is here to help in any way that you need us. And I can empathize with you, but But this
Yeah,
election's
because
going to be
you've
more
done this
than
before.
this election's going to be more, than probably most people have experienced. So just know that we're here to help in any way that you need us.
Absolutely.
Well, and that was one thing that I wanted to do, is thank everybody for being extremely accommodating, and all of the support that we've sort of had from every direction has made it a lot easier on our part. And so everybody has been absolutely fantastic to work with. So thank you very much.
Just let us know if you need anything.
Yeah. And the other thing is that if anybody ever has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, because we're happy to help out. There's usually a lot of communication that takes place as the election approaches. So we don't always, email is a fantastic way to get a hold of us. Sometimes it might take a little while for us to get back to you, but we try to get to those as fast as we can.
Okay. Well, I thank you, James, for all the information and for all your hard work.
Thank
And
you.
same for Eloise. I think we were going to move on and talk about the potential November 30th special town meeting. I think Margaret was going to share some information and perhaps some of the articles.
Well, I suppose we could at least start with a sampling. The board has seen at least twice now, a listing of possible special town meeting articles, many of which were deferred from the annual town meeting in order to make the annual town meeting more efficient, given that it was the first ever outdoor town meeting in the midst of COVID. So there were a few, and this is something that would probably be of great interest to people in town. One of the capital projects that was deferred was contract tree removal that had been approved or recommended by the capital planning committee. The board had initially supported that. I believe the finance committee supported that, and then it was deferred to a special, and that would be to appropriate $60,000 to contract for tree removal of up to 300 at-risk trees. And I know trees are a huge issue for residents right now. So that's one of the articles that's being presented to the board for consideration to be included in the capital budget article. A few others of interest would be that the school district is seeking special legislation because the transitional school committee that's been in place since the district was established was to have its first school committee election on the November 3rd state election ballot. The state, I know we expressed our feelings about adding anything onto the state election ballot, but the state was pretty clear that they were frowning upon any special elections being held simultaneously with this particular general election in November. So the school district is seeking, the school district and the two towns may have to jointly seek special legislation to allow the school committee election to be included on the annual town election ballot in the spring in the two communities. So more on that. What are the other ones of interest here? Several potential zoning bylaws or proposed zoning bylaws were deferred to a special town meeting. I'm not going to list all of them because at this point I have them only by zoning bylaw section number. But one would be addressing common driveways. One would be addressing limits on the number of adult use marijuana establishments. I think that the planning board was considering particularly retail establishments. So there are a few that we'll hear more from the planning board on. What else?
Town reports.
Oh, town reports. Town reports. That's good, Peg, and maybe the board might like to address this a little more. Currently, the bylaws call for mailing annual town reports to all voting households in the town. And the board was interested in soliciting feedback from the community about whether or not they want to continue to mail annual town reports to all voting households, or if they would prefer that the warrants be mailed. I think there are several different options to assure that warrants get to residents before the annual town meeting, and still make the annual town reports available online, maybe a limited supply in hard copy on request, put them around at different locations around town, in the town offices, at the post office. Does any board member want to elaborate on this possibility, or?
As you're talking, I was just thinking that perhaps we should put this on our next coffee talk and solicit feedback then.
But the next coffee talk, I think, is December.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we could find other ways to solicit feedback from the community. We talked a little bit about this, maybe putting a question. We could put a question or a mini survey in the tax bills.
Right.
We could do something like that. So it's costly. Many people use them. They're very useful to many people, but to others, they may not be as useful. So the question becomes, what is the most cost-effective way to get the information to residents so that they're able to be educated before town meeting? So I would recommend that the board continue to discuss this. We can plan to put a question in as an insert in the tax bills.
Yeah, I think that's the best idea.
Okay. And so right now there are, as the list stands right now, there are 27 potential special town meeting articles. COVID has complicated things a little bit. Having a town meeting in November, it wouldn't be very comfortable sitting outside through a town meeting that has 27 articles. So we are trying to look for an appropriate location to be able to accommodate a special town meeting. Unfortunately, Berlin Memorial School and Tohoto are using their large spaces they're using them as combined spaces for storage. I don't know if they're using them for expanded lunchrooms and things like that. We have now reached out to Assabet, which is also allowed to be used as a town meeting location in the town's bylaws. So I think we're still waiting to hear back from Superintendent Houle as to whether or not they have space available at Assabet. So that's our plan C, and we'll see if we have to expand to plan D, E, or F to find a location.
Keep posted.
Do we want to, while Chief's here, Margaret, do we want to talk anything about allowing Chief to serve after he turns the ripe old age of, 29?
Yes, that is another article. In fact, that's number one. That's article number one, Chief.
Because he is our number one.
So no, the special legislation would be required. It's a group 4 employee, which means it's a public safety employee they have certain retirement eligibility. So special legislation would be required to allow the fire chief to serve after the age of 65. So that's something that we would have as a potential article that we would need the town to vote on. It would be for the board to petition the legislature to allow the chief to serve beyond 65. I'd welcome that.
All right. So is there any questions for Margaret about this special town meeting, or go ahead?
Would the chief like to comment on that particular one, Chief? You interested in commenting on that? Not to
put him on the
You're
spot.
Johnny on the spot now.
Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Hey, Chief.
I would entertain at least a year after next May. You know, beyond that, I'm getting into my AVA time now, so it's like, yep. So it's like, but that's, yeah, we'll talk. You and I can talk.
Well, you know what I mean, Chief, you were a good find. You've done a lot of good things for the department. You took a department that probably didn't have a very good standing in the town, that had people going, and you've turned that around. So, you know, kudos to you and all the men and women that support you and take care of us on a daily basis. So personally, you know what, I found you, and I'd love to have you around a little bit while longer.
Thank you. And I think the only other thing I'd like to do is recognize, I think everyone knows firefighter Galato the other day, what he did. Friday, he put his full gear on, went up to Planet Fitness in Shrewsbury and did the 110 stairs, which is 1,980 steps. And I talked with him yesterday and asked him about it. And he had over 19,600 likes on his phone. So it's like, and he's a very humble, just a great, great kid. And it makes me proud to see that if the people and the young kids in the fire service are going to be like Johnny, the communities will be in good shape for a long time to come.
Oh, it was nice. Yeah, Channel 5 picked it up,
Yep.
and I think,
Yep, there he
oh,
He's a good one.
yeah, and Metro West had picked it up as well. So, yeah, that was very cool to see our town of Berlin.
You can see the new turnout gear that Berlin has been very gracious to purchase for the fire department last year. And again, this year, we're getting ready to make the second purchase this year, and looks really nice there. And it's like very functional. And yep, he's a great addition to the fire department. He comes ready to go every single day. So it's like, I wish I had 20 of them, you know, he's just that kind of kid.
Nice.
Thank you, Peg.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Mary.
Any more questions?
Not yet.
We'll keep
You know where I am.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to mute out. Thank you.
thank
Night,
you.
Chief.
All right, is there anything else on the possible special town meeting?
Just so you all know, Scott is on the move, off to his dinner date. And so he wanted to let everyone know that 8:30, he didn't just glitch out. He's got an appointment. So
Okay.
have a good time, Scott.
All right.
Through the chair, do any attendees have any attendees at all have any
Bring your
questions
hand up.
about special town meetings so far?
If so, throw your hand up.
Okay. All right. We also have the administrative finance team to talk about the fall tax bill.
The fall tax bills.
More
And
and
they
more
won't be
good
winter. They
The
won't be
best
late
will
winter.
last.
Probably one of the more exciting topics.
I
I
can
would
see
like to.
everybody running.
I would like to introduce, first of all, introduce the administrative finance team. I know June is probably here somewhere. June, Poland, Dennis Fairbay, Molly Reed and I comprise the administrative finance team. And Dennis, Molly, and June have worked really hard despite COVID despite COVID, to try to assure that tax bills, our regular tax bills, get out in a timely manner this year. There's been a whole lot of coordination. Everyone has had to work double time. And I just want to express my appreciation. Molly, do you want me to just quickly go through the anticipated mailing and due date, just so people can hear, and then you can just talk a little bit about the
Sure.
preliminary certification?
Yep.
Okay, so we anticipate now, based on our latest meeting, that the tax bills will be mailed the week of October 19th. And then the tax bills will be due 30 days from that bill, from the bill, the date on the bill. So we're looking at about November, no later than November 23rd, something in that vicinity. So which is about a full month or close to a full month before last year's, and well ahead of Christmas. I know that was a big issue with many people. So if it's okay with the chair, I'll turn it over to Molly just to address the preliminary certification she received today.
Yes, we got preliminary certification for the revaluation, and it's posted to the website. Thank you, Mary. If anybody wants to share it on Facebook, you can do that too. And so we have to do 5 days of public disclosure, which will be tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And it's up on, the values are up on our website in a PDF alpha by address list. And my vendor, you'll be able to go in to the online version from my vendor. They said that they would try to get it out by the end of business today, and I did not hear anything, so hopefully it'll be done tomorrow. And people, because of the COVID, people can call and email, and we'll try and accommodate them in any way we can and get things done. And the residential has gone up about 2%, and the condos have gone up about 1%, and the multifamilies have ggone up maybe 3%, but I think that's mostly because the apartments came online at a percent complete. It's not at full value yet, but it's up there and online. And the commercial values have gone down 7%, and that's mostly because it has nothing to do with COVID, because we had to look at things that happened prior to January 1st of 2020. But Highland Commons lost a bunch of tenants. The mall has tenants coming and going. So hopefully it won't drop that much next year, but it's tough for them to get tenants in, well, especially with COVID now. But like, I think the Highland Commons lost like 3 or 4 storefronts, and they still haven't even filled the other storefronts. So we took a very conservative look at it, and hopefully it'll all, I'm going to try and get you some preliminary stuff for our classification hearing on Monday night with using the preliminary values. I was working on it today, but my computer, my spreadsheets that the DOR gave just wouldn't work. So I decided to shut my computer off and go home, and maybe tomorrow the little whatever works in my computer to fix things that go wrong will happen.
The classification hearing is going to have to be continued to the 28th. That's when you'll have more definitive information. So we've talked about that. So and we've factored that into these dates. So.
Okay.
So
Anything
that's it. I'm happy we got preliminary. It was a nail biting.
I don't see June on the screen, but I just want to recognize her for getting, she was able to get the recap, her portions of the recap done before September 2nd. So she was really on the ball in trying to get this going through DOR. Dennis, would you like to address, I'm sorry, through the chair, Dennis, would you like to address the tax bills themselves and preparing them?
Yeah, it's going to take a week to 2 weeks for the computer company to kind of massage the data and generate a file that we can then print and process the bills. We're expecting a team to get together. There will be a flyer going out, a mini newsletter. And when we get done doing the primary mailing, we've had a lot of real estate sales. And what that creates that people don't realize, because of the way the law works, we have to do a second billing right away for what we call the care ofs. So if you were to purchase a house during a certain period of time, the law says the bill has to go out to the person who was the owner of record the January 1st before. But because of closings and lawyers kind of messing around, you really don't know as the tax collector who owes what for what part when a sale was made. So what happens is we send a bill to the person who sold it, and we send a bill to the person who bought it, and hope one of them pays the bill. Now, having said that, there's a lot of people that set up trust funds, so it's the same person getting the same bill with possibly a different name. And if it's the same address, you know, we won't mail it out, but it's extra work, more so because of all the sales that we've had. The other thing that has to do with billing, some people have been asking for extensions again, and they want to know why the selectmen can't extend the due dates. And it's just something you may hear, but unfortunately, without something from Boston, we're going to have to stick to the schedule that we have. We're a very tight town now. We also have a $15 minimum that we can't write off. So the minute you earn a penny of interest, it's $15.01. We have to collect it. We can't write it off like we did when it was $10. And there's reasons I won't go into, but most towns and cities are going to that number. Little concerned about the commercial billing. We're going to keep a strong eye on that one, but we do have some folks that are in bankruptcy, and they represent, I forget what the number is now, well over 33 or 34% of our revenue comes from the malls and the developments that we've done. And if one big one goes under, we end up picking up the rest of it as taxpayers. So we'll keep a close eye on that particular category. We also have a few more people that are going into tax title this year. And we're beginning to hear the stories of how challenging it is now if you don't have a job, et cetera. We always go out of our way to try to find any possible way to stick within the law, but help them make their payments and not lose their property. But unfortunately, on the other side, we have to make the painful decision of going ahead with a taking and putting it in tax title to start to take the property. So that's kind of what we're dealing with now. There'll be an ad in a couple of weeks, and there's a few people scrambling to try to dig up money from wherever they can just to keep their name out of the paper. It's kind of sad to watch. And I just wanted to take a minute, if I could, to talk about deferred taxes. And Molly and them are the experts on the details. But if you know of any elderly people that are really having a hard time paying their taxes, and in Berlin, they typically pay the tax and go without something else. It's the old school. They can defer their taxes, especially as an alternative to a reverse mortgage, which can be pretty nasty things. Deferred taxes let you put aside and not pay the taxes for up to 50% of the value of your house, which always go up in value. So it's pretty hard to get to that 50%. You have to be a certain age and you have to live in the state for a certain time and in the town for a certain time. But there are some people that have taken advantage of it. And the only people who quote unquote suffer are the heirs that have to pay that back before they get their share of whatever value is left.
We're going to touch a little bit on that in the newsletter, the tax deferrals, the tax exemptions, and things like that, just to be sure people are aware of what they can do if they're facing any hardships.
Yep.
Dennis.
We have payment plans, but they're kind of like COBRA plans. They're so expensive, you sometimes wonder why do they have those programs. You have to keep up to date with your current taxes, and you're already in trouble with your past taxes. So I've only had 2 successful out of many payment plans that actually work. And we go out of our way to try to get folks on those too. But unfortunately, sometimes you just have to pull the trigger and start the process.
Dennis, we lowered the interest rate for tax deferrals to 5% a few years ago, right?
It was 5 or 4, yeah, one of them. It's default, you can't go over 8% but the town can lower it to, I think it was 5%, you're right.
Yeah, would it make it more palatable for people if it got lowered a little bit more? I mean, we only have,
There's only
Wait,
one,
I-
isn't there?
I think we only have one that's still open. Everybody
Okay.
else had paid off, so.
Well, one of the problems is it's technically a tax title legally.
Well, that's
And-
for the books.
Yeah, for me, for the way we treat it. But one of the problems is you have some people that have deferred taxes, and then the next year they go into tax title because they forgot to do their paperwork. So, and we've had troubles with people in the past that it was sad they wouldn't even open the door to sign the paperwork. So we try to get them to sign the paperwork every year, and not every year they qualify. So it has to do with finances too.
Yeah, I think it's a good discussion point. I assume that the select board would need, or does town meeting need to vote that?
It needs to go, that's what I was thinking when you talked about the special town meeting, if we thought it would be beneficial to lower it a little bit more, because what,
It wouldn't be,
5% is-
obviously, it wouldn't be applicable, for this particular billing cycle, but I think it's incumbent upon the town to try to find ways to to mitigate the burden on taxpayers who are facing difficulties. And so I think that's something that, that we as the administrative finance team should consider bringing to the board.
Margaret, is this something, Margaret and Dennis, Dennis, where you're talking about, the elderly in town, is this an opportunity to get our friend Victoria, who's sitting in the attendance box, on board to talk to the seniors in town and bring it up at a council on aging, just to help disseminate information out there and possible opportunities to help?
well, we're gonna put it in, we're gonna put a little blurb in with Margaret's letter for the tax bill, and then we were gonna put it in Powder House, which we put it in Powder House every year. So.
Maybe there's a potential, now that we have Zoom, maybe there's a potential that we could talk about a little webinar that we could, just discuss these programs. So we've been talking about doing, I know there's been Finance 101 in the past, so we've been talking about doing a few different things like that, so.
And one of the obstacles is pride more than anything. There are also other programs that they might possibly qualify for through the assessor's office. So, income.
It's all based on income and assets, so, and age. And the age thing is I think that in this point in time, that the age thing is gonna be too high for the people who are affected most by COVID. I think that's the middle of the age range. Because it's 65, we've lowered it as low as the state allows, so, or is it 60? I'll have to double check that. It's late and I got other numbers running through my head.
Yeah, no, just thinking that it would be a good opportunity for, Victoria and, her band of merry men and merry women, that talk and get together all the time to help disseminate the information. Sometimes it might be easier for a friend to lean over and talk to someone on the side to say, hey, did you know about, rather than having to come to you, Dennis, or come to you, Molly, and be like, okay, now I'm sticking out like a sore thumb walking through the town offices, type of thing.
Well, hopefully they'll get the information out in multiple different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything that June might want to add?
Come on, June.
No, I think you guys,
Come on.
no, you guys all covered it. I think you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Wow.
June, are you drinking your coffee?
Tea. Tea, Margaret, it's tea.
It's tea.
I got some tea. It's all good.
Well, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to have an in-person coffee talk so that we can enjoy some of your
Margaret,
husband's wonderful baked goods, June.
That's right, and Mary's, carafes of coffee that jazz everybody out. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Willie's going through baking withdrawals because he has nobody to bake for. So we'll work on that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if you individually wrap them, then we can come by and pick them up. Just saying.
You're right. You're
I just
right.
wanna-
Or we
I-
could always do a drive-by. Who knows?
You could, you know, once again, where's Victoria? Push her back into panelist. We will use the COA. They can stand outside and hand them out as people go by in the cars. So there you go.
There we go.
There she is.
She's like, oh, I never should have took this job. Look how much I get volunteered by her.
It's all good.
Again, I want to thank, I want to, through the chair, I want to thank Molly, Dennis, and June for all the work they've been putting in. COVID's made it extra tough, and so they deserve a great deal of thanks, as do all the department heads who attended tonight. I'm so thrilled.
Yeah. Well, if you're through with that discussion point, I was just going to ask the general public if there were any questions or comments before we call it an evening. If not, I was going to also ask if Mary could share the Mary. if
Mary,
share the
My kid gave me an ice cream sandwich. I'm chowing down.
we're shutting off your camera.
I was going to promote the need for volunteers for the town of Berlin, and I didn't know whether Mary had, or even Margaret, if either one of you could share maybe the commissions or committees that were in most need.
Mary, do you want me to do this since you have the ice cream sandwich, or would you like to?
I can multitask.
Okay, between bites.
In between bites. On the main website, the Selectmen, the townofberlin.com. This is the homepage. There's Carl Wickstrom amongst his lilies. If you go up to the government bar, you can go down to look at volunteer opportunities. And in there, we have a listing of what's currently vacant, and we need interested. Oh my goodness. Well, there you go. I got egg on my face, but we need, I'll fix that. But I did put this up on Facebook, I'm pretty sure, today. Oops, that's my Facebook.
Nice, Mary. Nice.
Bagged. All right, hold on.
See, and you thought that all these coffee talks were boring. Now we can look at Mary's Facebook page.
We went on, well, while Mary's looking that up, we've been doing, we know that people have very busy lives. They travel out of town often. Their focus is elsewhere. But we, the town, count on volunteers to keep the town running. And so I've been hoping to try to put together some sort of marketing campaign to recruit volunteers, get people interested in serving on town boards and committees. I came across something in the town of Acton, and I don't think Mary's going to show this on screen. The town of Acton developed a marketing campaign for volunteers, and I have to be honest, I immediately thought of Peg on this one. It's a marketing campaign, a YouTube video called Captain Acton, and it shows a person, a caped crusader, flying through the air with a mask on in search of volunteers.
I want a cape. I want a cape. I'm more than happy to do this, but I need a cape.
It is the cutest video I've seen for it. So if anybody is interested in looking at that, and Peg, we'll have to think of something for you, flying through the air in search of volunteers.
Hey, you know what? Amy dressed me up as a working, blinking Christmas tree for the Berlin's Lions Club, Christmas in Berlin back in December. So if we give her enough time, I bet that she can whip me up another costume. I have zero pride. I'm not a problem.
That's perfect.
To attract people, see?
That's, Margaret, that will be part of my my campaign. Here I come, flying into town.
You've got to see that. You've got to see the YouTube video. Let's search on Captain Acton.
All right, I'm looking.
I'll send it to Peg. So
Cool,
these are
thanks.
these are the current vacancies, one on cable access, one on cable advisory. What do these different committees do? Each of them have a page up on our website that you can see what their mission statement is and how many members there are, how long a term lasts for. And there's also, when you go back to that website, there's the form for volunteering. And you'd fill it out and you just send it to the selectman's office. It's all right here with the email address, or you can snail mail it to the selectman. And the process then is that an application gets sent off to the host board or committee for a vote of recommendation back to the selectmen for the selectmen appointed committees. And then the selectmen will vote. And then you get sworn in by Eloise and you're off and running and helping with different boards and committees. Right now, Energy Committee is probably the most challenged with 5 seats, 4 are empty at the moment.
So there's essentially no energy committee at the moment because they can't even meet. So energy committee could use some qualified, some energetic volunteers. Capital planning committee, having attended their meeting, they have some important work to do as well. There is one vacancy for a board appointee on that committee and another vacancy as a moderator appointee. So there are 2 vacancies on that committee. So they could use some support there. It's an important role. So
Victoria's back. There's also the Council on Aging has a vacancy.
Council on Aging, several committees. So we'd appreciate, we need you to volunteer.
So we're looking forward to hearing from many of you now.
Yes, please.
And possibly having Zoom mentoring for new people interested in serving and understanding what that might entail.
Working on the board and committee handbook, putting that together to provide more solid guidance for new recruits.
Yep. So
I'm sure I'll be hearing from people in the next 5 days.
Yes.
That's right. Board of Assessors has a vacant position on the elected Board of Assessors.
Well, and as we talked about before, I think it came up at the last coffee talk, is that people may not have an opportunity to devote, an hour a week, an hour every 2 weeks, but as in point with our, Captain Library, Evan, who came out of the woodwork to help specifically on a project, think about that as well. That if there's something that comes up that piques your interest, if you can write a grant, write a something, do a something, for a few hours, absolutely. We're certainly not going to turn people away because you can't give an hour a week, for the next 3 years of your life. So appreciate anything that the town can give.
All right. Seeing no other questions, I guess we could say good night for the evening anyway.
Awesome.
So I don't know if we need to make a motion to adjourn.
No, it's a coffee talk. We're not voting. We're not deliberating. We're out.
Okay.